Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And it's been a while since I've done one of these recaps of the previous week. I know it's been a few weeks since I've done my usual, like, 3 or 4 NFL related videos every week. Lately, I've been doing just previews of the Vikings games and then raw reactions to the Vikings games. A couple of these last couple weeks, I haven't even done that. I've been just doing the raw reactions. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was completely engulfed in making Twins content. And a part of that also was just I got really busy, so apologies for some of that. But I am now back. The Twins are unfortunately out of the playoffs. It's if it's any solace, gosh, that's like the fourth Edmonton Oilers power play so far tonight already, and it's the first period. Anyway, I'll try not to get distracted by the Wild game, but yeah, unfortunately the Twins got knocked out. Based on the way I've seen the Rangers and Astros series go, we just didn't have the offense to run with these teams. We wouldn't have had any chance in the next round anyway, so that's a little bit of solace there. Anyway, though, with all that being out of the way, I'm back to making this kind of content, and I decided to switch things up because I realized that just kind of recapping the games isn't quite as fun either for me or for anyone to watch. I feel like it's more fun for me to actually rank these teams rather than just shouting out the final score that a lot of you clearly already know from watching the games and then just saying a couple things about the games themselves. I figured it would be more, productive and more fun and entertaining to actually go through and rank the teams from 1 to 32. And a lot of people do that as well. So I figured I would throw my hat into the ring. And as I was ranking these teams, I realized it is difficult to do, like to do a power ranking where you've seen all these teams play good games this season and bad games, and it's just there's a lot of teams that are kind of muddled up in the middle right now. So it made it pretty difficult to pick some of these, I will not lie. So there's going to be some shakeups between my rankings and other people's rankings, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that feel like I either made good picks or bad picks or whatever have you. But let me know in the comments what you think because I always love to hear your reactions to all of these things. But anyway, let's start to get into this. So at number 32, I have the Carolina Panthers, and there's 3 or 4 teams in this bottom four that could go in 32. But I just feel like the Panthers have a good future, and Bryce Young clearly struggling now, but he's shown the flashes, and this is the way that a quarterback should play as a rookie in the NFL. I mean, there is some serious outliers. Joe Burrow had a very impressive rookie season, and Cam Newton. I mean, I'm sure there's many other examples. Those are just the first two I could think of for some reason. But there's a lot of rookie QBs that prove that wrong. But for the most part, this is how it should go. A rookie QB, no matter, even if they were the number one overall pick, they should go into their first season and they should struggle out of the gate, especially with a team behind them like the Panthers have, where they're all rebuilding. So it's not necessarily one of those things where Panthers fans should necessarily be down in the dumps. The only bad thing about it is if they do end up with the worst record in the league, it just will end up going to the Bears because they traded up to get Bryce Young, but that's the burden they bear for making that decision and getting their guy. But yeah, Panthers on both ends of the ball have some promise, but I mean, they're just the worst team in the league right now. Number 31, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is another team where I know I feel like their situation for the future is a little more shaky, but I do expect them to get their quarterback of the future in this next draft. And if the Bears or Broncos don't end up getting Caleb Williams, maybe they'll go for him, although it's a weird situation with Caleb Williams right now. But if they don't get him, Drake May, I could actually see a really good fit with the Cardinals as well. But yeah, this team is just checked out. I mean, that's the way it is right now for the Arizona Cardinals on both sides of the ball. They just don't have that drive. I mean, players just are not playing as hard. I mean, no one would admit that that's the way it works, but it really is. Whether it's psychological or not, these players are just done. Denver Broncos is my 30th team. This is a team that it's kind of the opposite, where it's not like they had low expectations and then couldn't deliver on them, even the lowest of expectations, and with the Cardinals, it's like when you go into it with such low expectations and then you are sucking just like everyone expected, there's a certain demoralization that comes with that. With the Broncos, people are actually thinking, okay, maybe Sean Payton could, come into this franchise and revitalize it. I've never felt that way about Sean Payton. I, I'm even in an unbiased sense, I don't think he's as good of a coach as people think he is. And it's easy to say that now with him struggling with the Broncos, but I've never really felt that way. And also, I just hate him. We all know that I hate Sean Payton. So this is I love watching this happen. But for the Denver Broncos, I mean, they're at risk of having to trade away some of these players. And Patrick Surtain's supposed to be the cornerback of the future for them, but if he doesn't want to be there, he might end up getting traded away. I mean, this Broncos team is just a couple more steps away from just snapping and tanking fully. Russell Wilson's not what he was cracked up to be, and this Broncos team, they're in for a downward spiral, in the coming months. Chicago Bears. Now these are the four, right? These four teams: Panthers, Cardinals, Broncos, Bears. That's the core four of these rough teams right now. Chicago Bears came into this season and people were really hyping them up, and they the one or two games that they've played well offensively, their defense just happened to sell that same game. I mean, besides those games, their offense has been atrocious. Their backup QB is at risk of taking over the job from Justin Fields, who just going into this season people were thinking would be the savior of this franchise. So I don't know. I feel like the Bears are due for another quarterback if Justin Fields keeps this up. I mean, the last couple seasons he has not gotten the help that he, deserved to have. And I'm not saying he has a good team surrounding him this year either, but like even in games where he's had help and his blockers have been good for him, I mean, he's just not delivered. And that's the unfortunate truth about the situation for the Bears. The Tennessee Titans, I have at 29. I mean, it's the same story. They had to rely on Derrick Henry in order to have a shot, and he didn't. I mean, it's almost impossible for him to do enough to lead this team at this point. Just no help offensively, defense checking out. This Titans team, is just not in a good situation right now. I have the Commanders at a 27, or excuse me, 32, 30, 30, 29, 20. Yeah, 27. Um, this is a team that, again, people were viewing as kind of a sneaky team going into this year. And I mean, they've just been kind of exactly the team that you expect to see from them. Their defense isn't nearly as good as they're supposed to be. They're supposed to carry on defense, and they haven't been able to do it. 26 is a one that really, hits me in the heart, because they're the Giants at 26, and it's a team that I was so high on this season. I mean, it's just really sad how high I was on them. They really sold me out. Oh, geez. Kane's on the ice. Looks like he's okay. Anyway, the Giants sold me out. I was saying, man, this Giants team is going to be in the fifth seed. They're going to even overtake the Cowboys for that second position in the NFC East. And they're a serious threat. They might even be one of the best teams in the NFC going into the season. I could not have been more wrong. I thought that Darren Waller was going to be the X factor that brought this team together, and he's been playing better recently. But man, this team is just a mess, and they are in serious SOS mode right now. And it's just, I feel like it was almost a similar situation to the Vikings, except the Vikings are looking more on the up now, and I probably have them higher than they should be. So get ready to boo at that. But I feel like the Giants are in a similar situation to the Vikings, except they gave in to all of that pressure after losing the first couple or struggling in the first few games of the season. Managed to win one of them, against a really bad team. They just kind of spiraled, which is exactly what the Vikings could have done, but they didn't. And so now people are even talking about Saquon leaving. It's just a whole mess for the Giants. Las Vegas Raiders are there at 25. Another team that I feel like could be better than it is. I don't think that they would be necessarily a playoff team or anything like that, but certainly shouldn't be in this bottom fourth of the league that I have them in just barely. Jimmy Garoppolo has been what he was expected to be, which is serviceable, and even then, like he's struggled at times. You know a team's playing badly when you almost forget that a star caliber player like Devonte Adams is even on the team because they're just off the map. I mean, I've heard less about the Raiders than any other team this year, and that's not a good thing. Indianapolis Colts at 24. I'm gonna kind of move through these a little quicker now. The Indianapolis Colts at number 24. This is a team again where it's like besides Anthony Richardson and his injuries and now they might not get him back. Besides that, you don't hear much about this team. It's another very forgettable team. On both sides of the ball, it looks like they're also gearing towards a potential, complete tanking, but they showed enough resilience this season where that's not quite going to happen quite yet. I think next year they'll be one of the worst teams in the league. Even with Anthony Richardson potentially coming back, they just don't have the pieces. Houston Texans, honestly, 23 is, oh man, Oilers scored another goal. 23 honestly is not that bad for the Texans, considering they were supposed to be the worst team again this year, and they sit at 500 right now. And excuse me, honestly, they've shown a lot of resilience as well. The defense is better than we expected them to be, and just honestly really impressive so far for the Texans. Did not expect them to have a better record than the Vikings at this point in the season, and trying to prove that maybe an Ohio State quarterback can actually get the job done in the NFL. We'll have to see, but you know, trying to prove that point so far. St. Louis Rams, or excuse me, LA Rams, what's wrong with me? At 22, and this is one where I struggle. I felt like I should put them higher than they are, but I feel like even with the few impressive weeks they played, they upset the Seahawks. Some young players proving themselves, and it was cool to see all that. But even with all that, it felt like that was their absolute peak, and it wasn't that impressive of a peak. And now they've kind of started to play again like expected. So this is where it starts to get really muddled, where the LA Rams in previous seasons could have been higher, could have been even lower in previous seasons. But there's kind of a strip of teams now where it's kind of just in the middle. We're not really sure about them. And it brings me now to number 21, which is the Green Bay Packers. This is a team that looked like an absolute mess. I mean, it was rock bottom for them, for the franchise, in a long time to lose to the Denver Broncos. As frustrating as a season as they had last year, and the other frustrating losses they've had this season, losing to the Broncos is sad. And I hope the Vikings don't lose to the Broncos. Oh, Wild scored again. How about that? But hopefully the Vikings don't lose to the Broncos because that's a fate worse than death. Packers are on the downswing right now. Play calling, honestly, really bad. Matt LaFleur, I mean, it's kind of coming to light now. I feel like that a lot of the success of Matt LaFleur was Aaron Rodgers. And now Rodgers has left, and Jordan Love is not, again, he's not a horrible quarterback. It's just that this play calling is not good enough to get the Packers onto that level. They could be maybe a fringe playoff team if they could get the play calling better, but it feels like LaFleur is honestly going to be on the hot seat after the season's over if he keeps this up. New York Jets are at 20, or excuse me, it's actually 21 that the Jets are at. The Packers are 22. I really should have numbered these. I have like a 17 through 24 and then a 9 through 16 on this tier list thing that I have, so I probably should have numbered them out so I don't keep stumbling over it. But we have the New York Jets at 21, a team that with Rodgers would be top 10. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. This Jets defense holds their own sauce as a next level, even with the quarterback play that he's been handed. Garrett Wilson's still a good wide receiver for this team, and it's crazy how big of a leap they could take with a better QB and with potentially Aaron Rodgers, if he was still in, I could definitely see this team being close to top five even at this point this season. New England Patriots at 19. Again, I feel like a better quarterback could make this team. I mean, offense honestly hasn't been too poor. Like they've held their own, and the defense has been very impressive. It's just Mac Jones is here, not here, not here, but he's just here, and this team isn't going to be anything more than it is right now, unless they get a quarterback that can get to that next level. Mac Jones is just mediocre, and it's unfortunate truth. Um, 19 or 18 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is another team where I feel like I'm just waiting. I'm sitting here waiting for that moment where they crash down, and they're currently in that seventh seed. Hopefully, the Vikings can take them over. But this is where it continues to be very muddled between like the Jets up to where what will end up being 13th and 14th spots. Those like 20 to 14 are very muddled. But this Bucks team defense has been pretty impressive. Baker Mayfield has not been great, but he's been decent. And I think that's been a major factor for the Buccaneers is having that resilience. They don't want to be defined by the seasons that Brady gave them. They want to be defined by them being that team, not just being the Tampa Bay Tom Brady's. And they showed that resilience so far in this season. Impressive for them to also be in the playoffs currently as it stands. New Orleans Saints at 17, just out of the playoff contention. I still feel something good about this Saints team. I don't know what it is. And I still put them on the bottom half of the league, but just barely, because I feel like they could still potentially make a run if they can just get more consistent. I mean, they've had good games this season. I just feel like sometimes their offense needs to match their defensive production, and I feel like they honestly could rise to a different level, not necessarily to be a contender. I think they could potentially sneak into the playoffs, especially with such a muddled NFC field. Number 16, we have the Atlanta Falcons. This is also a team where I feel like they've been inconsistent and a team that I feel could also sneak its way into the playoffs. I feel like there's really four teams that are kind of in the run for that 7 seed right now. They're a shifty team. Desmond Ridder is what's the concern about this team. He's not been playing very well right now. If he keeps playing this way, I don't think the Falcons have as good of a chance. But if he turns it around, the rest of this team has been good enough to potentially get that 7 seed. And then here at 15, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, should they be lower after we were one loss away from being 2-5. Instead we're 3-4 with a completely different outlook on the season. This did not look like even a 3-4 team against the 49ers last night, and I don't want to be too optimistic because, Vikings fans know we get optimistic and then it all falls apart and then we feel stupid for ever believing in this team, and that's the way it always goes. But I don't know. I mean, what I saw Kirk Cousins performing in that big situation under the lights, and one very underrated moment in that game was how frustrated Kirk got a couple times at the false starts and the delay of games, which usually you don't want to see your quarterback frustrated, but I like it out of Kirk. He's shown more and more fire as his career has gone along, and he showed he did not want to be denied on this Monday Night Football game, and he wasn't. Jordan Addison, now that we know that we can perform well without Justin Jefferson coming back is going to be an absolute. I mean, it blows my mind how good this team could be now with Jefferson in, because I think we needed to have that slap in the head or smack in the head of, wait a second, we're not just the Minnesota Justin Jeffersons. We have other players on this team, and that doesn't mean we think we can live without them in the future. Don't get me wrong, but this team is capable of performing without him in at least enough of a capacity for us to believe in this team still. And now, knowing what we can do without him, if he comes back on the field with Addison now being established as the number 2, with all this amazing wide receiver depth of players that can come in if something does happen again, I just feel much better about this Vikings team. Brian Flores is finally getting the defense to hit the quarterback, and hopefully he can continue that. The one thing that's missing, if the Vikings can start scoring touchdowns instead of field goals in the red zone, and if they can give up less turnovers, this team goes from potentially selling, which we thought they were, to being a legitimate threat in the playoffs, just like that. And that's the most optimistic I've been in a long time about this team, but that game completely revitalized it for me. Let's go through these a little more quickly. San Diego Chargers are at 14. Or excuse, yeah, 14. I gosh, I'm sorry. What's wrong with me? Um, but a lot of people probably think they should be lower than this at this point, with them losing another game, falling to 2-4, which is, I mean, this is probably the highest you'll see a 2-4 team be. But man, I mean, some of the teams they've lost to, they just barely lost to some decent teams. You know, they hung with the Chiefs. I mean, I just feel like the Chargers aren't that far removed from the Vikings. You know, they've got, I still hold that Herbert is a better quarterback in the league than people want to think. And this team, it's just, it's a very similar story to the Vikings. They can't come up big in those big moments. They have given up way too many mistakes, and they just give up games late. And if they didn't give up those games late, if they found a way to power through and win them, they could potentially be one of the best records in the league. And it's crazy to think that. So yes, I think the Chargers are the best 2-4 team in this league right now, the best 2-4 team in a while in this league, honestly. And if they can string some wins together, they're in a rough division and conference. If they can string some wins together, they still have a shot. And then we have the Bengals at 14, 16, 15, 13. My gosh, I'm sorry. The Bengals at 13. And they're another team where, I mean, I'm just it's kind of the opposite of the Bucks, where with the Bucks I'm kind of waiting for them to falter. With the Bengals, I'm sitting here waiting. Like, it's kind of like that meme of the guy poking the thing with a stick saying, "Come on, do something." I'm waiting for the Bengals to do something. And I still feel it coming in the ear tonight, oh Lord, where something's got to happen, right? I mean, still is one of the best QBs in the league. I'm not going to let the first half of one season change my mind about that. But Joe Burrow coming into the season after having some of the best seasons of a young career you can have, offense absolutely cooking, offensive line still a concern. And if he can shake off these injuries, I still feel like this Bengals team, they're still sitting at 3-3 right now. I mean, this is, again, tough division, tough conference, but I just don't see how this Bengals team can't have a resilient second half to this season. I mean, it happens every year. The Bengals have a rough start, and then they come charging back. And maybe it's a little different this season because of the injury stuff, but I mean, I feel like it has to happen. Steelers, and it's crazy. You know, I understand. Steelers are sitting at 4-2. Chargers are at 2-4, and they're two apart in the power rankings. It's not just a record ranking. If not, this list would be different. But Steelers defense is carrying them, and I don't know if that's going to hold up later on in the season. Matt Canada might be one of the worst offensive coordinators I've ever seen, but this defense is carrying them. It's doing their job, and I mean, that's all I can really say. Seattle Seahawks, again, Steelers, I hate to watch them. Like, I admit they're good, but it's just I don't like watching teams that just get carried by their defense. It's not as fun for me. Seattle Seahawks, man, maybe I should have put them a little bit lower because they have been very inconsistent this season. But when they've had good games, they've really had good games. And you saw glimpses of last year's Seattle Seahawks before they took that nosedive. This season, it's kind of been like this. Last season, it was kind of up and then dropped down, and they lost momentum at the worst part of the season at the very end going into the playoffs. But I don't know. I mean, if they can get momentum and play like they have in those good games, you never know what can happen. Oh man, I gotta kind of cruise through this. Buffalo Bills are my number 10 team. I think that, man, I still believe in Josh Allen. He has struggled. He just lost to the Patriots. I mean, how painful does it have to be for the Bills to lose to the Patriots after all those years of domination? I don't know. I still believe in him though. I still believe in the this team to battle back. This defense is still a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I just feel like something will click. If something clicks like I feel it will, then the Bills will be right back to business. But we'll have to see if that happens before we get to really crunch time in the season. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 9, a team that we saw the way they played in the first couple of weeks of the season, and I was like, man, maybe that was just a flash in the pan last year. And then they have been coming back, battling 4-2. Maybe I mean they're being viewed as one of the weaker 4-2 teams in the league, but they're still 4-2. And I mean I feel like I need to see them play against a couple better teams, but I still feel like they warrant top 10 status right now. Number 8, I have the Cleveland Browns. They are kind of like the Steelers, where their defense is carrying their offense, except they also have a really good running game. Where I feel like that if you can hold another team to very few points, but still be able to run it a little bit down their throats. I mean, every running back that has come up, even with the huge injury, um, to Nick Chubb, every running back has come in and performed. It's crazy that this running game is still that good, even without him. And this defense is just one of the best defenses I've seen in a while. Third best defense in the league for sure, and Steelers fourth, and then a couple teams in the top three that are taking those couple spots. At number 7, I have the Detroit Lions. Now this sucks because for the longest time I have rooted for the Lions to make the playoffs, to be able to be a good team, and they finally are. But I was hoping it would kind of be a coincidence and coincide with the Vikings sucking and the Lions being good, so that we don't have to worry about it. But unfortunately, the Vikings are now rising up a little bit more, and I'm not saying this is going to last. It might not, but if it does, it could be a race for the NFC North. I mean, the Vikings are now all of a sudden only 2 away. It's kind of one of those things where I said at the beginning of the season, when I made my initial predictions about these teams, that the Lions were last year, were the year before, and will be this year a team. Every team is based off of some momentum. The Lions are one of the most momentum driven teams, I think, in the league in these last couple of years. And it's going to be a big test now. What will they do after this huge loss to the Ravens? We saw them, take a huge dip. The momentum went totally down for them, and then the momentum went way up for them at the end of the season. What will they be able to take this downward momentum and bring it back up? Because they weren't able to do that until midway through the season last year. If they get on a big skid like that again at this point in the season, it's going to be rough for them. So I want to see if they can respond and bounce back from that. Because if not, the Vikings are more than happy to rise up, win some of these easy games in a row, and take their seat. But the thing is, the Lions have just as easy of a schedule coming up as the Vikings. So I mean, it's just one of those situations. Dallas Cowboys are at 6 for me. They still have a good enough defense, and have been clutch enough in certain situations to the point where I mean I saw them perform against the Chargers, and I was like, okay, the fact that they were able to come back, win that game in a big moment, even though it was the Chargers, it still made me feel good enough about this team where I put them as the sixth best team. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to do anything in the playoffs, because it's the Cowboys' way to lose in either the first or second round. They're not going anywhere past that. But I still feel like they warrant getting that spot as of right now. Regular season wise, they played like the sixth best team in the league. Ravens I have at 5, and the win against the Lions really shifted them. I feel like I would have had them. This is the first week I've been doing these power rankings. I feel like I would have had them down towards 8 or even 9, close to the bottom of the top 10 before that game. But it felt like that wasn't just a flash in the pan for the Ravens. It felt like that was the breath of fresh air that they needed to start really getting to work. I feel like this team has been very stiff, very nervous. There's a lot of nervous energy surrounding the expectations of this team, and now I feel like it finally got released. And these Ravens can finally play like themselves. As long as players don't start getting hurt again, like in previous seasons, I feel like this could potentially be a very good team going forward, and that's why I have them at number 5. Miami Dolphins are at 4. Even with that rough loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, people are acting like they got smacked. The Dolphins lost by a very small margin against, I'm going to spoil a little bit, but the best team in the league, in my opinion, in the Philadelphia Eagles. And they did it in prime time. I mean, they held their own throughout this game. Um, and they were even a big threat to the Eagles in a lot of big part of this game. So, and also I will say refs kind of had it out for the Dolphins in that game. I'm not saying they would have won if the refs hadn't made certain calls. I'm just saying didn't make that the situation look better for them in that situation. But I mean, Tyreek Hill is the next level. Tua is proving people wrong left and right. And this defense is nothing to sneeze at either. I mean, they are an exciting team, and I think that they could be one of the best teams in the AFC going forward. San Francisco 49ers, I have it third. They would have been 1 or 2 after, I mean, before this week, and then I saw Brock Purdy play in this game, and he made some mistakes. And this is the first time I've seen in these last couple weeks that I've seen some vulnerabilities in this team. And in order to be 1 or 2, you either have to have no vulnerabilities or your vulnerabilities need to feel very fixable. And I feel like Purdy played a couple rough games. He could definitely bounce back. We're talking the difference between first and third overall. I mean, I'm not saying that the 49ers suck all of a sudden, but it's at least enough to warrant them bouncing out of that spot. Kansas City Chiefs are number 2. It's kind of a battle between these two teams that met in the Super Bowl last year. But the Chiefs, I mean, I feel like you can't, I mean, they could be third or fourth right now, but Patrick Mahomes, you still have to believe in him. Kelsey's still doing well. And honestly, this defense has been great. I mean, imagine how if this offense can pick its way back up after kind of having a slow start to the season, imagine what can happen with the way the defense has been playing and if their offense can pick up. I mean, it's scary for me to think of that and imagine that happening. And then finally, at number 1, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, best team in the league, I think. Just thoroughly the most complete team. They haven't necessarily played like the best team in the league so far this season. Honestly, I feel like the 49ers, besides these last couple games, have outplayed them. But I feel like all 3 or 4 of these top 4 teams have now had a couple rough games. But the Eagles, I feel like, have persevered through those games more than the other teams. Tush push is lethal. I feel like, I was even going into the game last Sunday night, I was like one of those stuffy people where I was like, oh, and this is obviously me being biased against the Eagles. I recognize that. But I was one of those people that was like, oh, it's stupid tush push, like it's so unfair. And I mean, we've seen multiple teams try it. We've seen the Vikings try it. It's not the scheme that's the issue. It's the fact that these players are really good executing it. Jalen Hurts and how much he can squat. Not to mention, Jason Kelsey is insanely strong at center. I mean, all it took was to see Bradbury and Kirk try and do that. And I mean, I'm not Kirk. It's not Kirk's forte. Like, I'm not saying that that's something to knock on Kirk, but we saw Kirk and Bradbury try it. It's pretty clear it's not just a scheme thing. Otherwise, people would be trying it week after week. And I got to admit that it was just my anti Eagles bias. That was the reason I was saying all those things. But yeah, Eagles, best team in the league. I mean, if they can get some of these issues that they have, they had some issues that they would probably consider within their own organization as some serious issues that they got to fix. And even in that case, they still have only lost 1 game all season. It's just crazy. Eagles are continuously the biggest threat in the NFL. But anyway, those are my top 32 teams. Please let me know in the comments what you think about my rankings. Again, the middle points really muddled, very difficult to speak on in terms of what to expect from these teams going forward, even not to mention what we've seen so far this season. So again, love to talk through the comments. Let me know what you think. And I look forward to doing this more often throughout the season, and also make sure to watch out for some picks and predictions for next week. I'm actually going to do them. So look out for that and look out for my preview of Vikings Packers in the next coming days. So thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.